So we're on the continuum of dissociation, talking about this as Richard Schwartz would talk about. I'll give you the overall statement. The earlier trauma happens to someone and overwhelms their nervous system, because that's what trauma is. Trauma is about experience that overwhelms the nervous system, and the nervous system cannot process it. So it has other ways to cope, we'll put it that way, right? So the earlier the trauma happens, the less ability a human being has to cope in a rational way, because their brain is not developed that way yet. And the longer it goes on, the more it is necessary for what we call primitive coping mechanisms to happen. So not, you know what, let me think about this and maybe I'll just do something else, or maybe I'll get out of here. No, as a young child, you're kind of trapped in the situation, and you have to come up internally with ways to cope. So Schwartz says the earlier the trauma happens, the longer it goes on, the more distinct parts develop in our personality in order to cope with that overwhelming stimulation.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That's IFS.
Yeah, that makes
and
sense. Yeah.
You and I can give some personal examples of that if we want, and I can give some client examples of that. Which will kind of make it, it'll make it more real for you.
Yeah, make it tangible. Sure. Yeah. Go there if you want.
So let me say a few things about that. Let me hold that and then go back to this continuum. So here we are at one end of the continuum where we're talking about daydreaming and leaving the gas cap in and not remembering. And, my car goes right to work and I don't remember making the left turn. Like, it just goes there. It just goes home. So if I start getting in car accidents, then there's a problem.
Self-driving cars, hurry up.
For the most part, right. And if we move up the continuum, we have something called post-traumatic stress disorder, where classic example is you have a Vietnam veteran. He's walking down the street, and there's a car that either backfires or honks really loudly, and he hunches down, he's on the pavement, and he's thinking that there's a bomb going off, and he's hearing shots, and he's back in Vietnam. You say, what the heck is that? Okay. That's dissociation in a whole nother way, which means I leave the present moment. I'm not in 2021 here. I'm back in 1969 in another place and time. And that is very real. And I see it all the time, Vinny, with people. I work with veterans who in a residential treatment program who really have a difficult time staying in the present moment because of, and we're talking about not Vietnam, some of them are Vietnam, but really most of them now are Iraq War from the early 2000s into the middle 2000s, and 4 tours and 5 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the kinds of things they've seen and experienced, and the deaths, and I could go on and on, right? So talk about overwhelming for your nervous system. So literally being in another place and time and not knowing where you are is very scary. And that's a dissociative episode. That's what we call it, a dissociative episode, where you're not in 2021 on October 10th, at 9:25 Pacific Standard Time, a.m. And that's your limbic system again. That's when your thinking brain is not on board. You're in total survival mode. You're in the limbic system, which is in the center back part of your brain. You're also in your brain stem, which is at the bottom, right near your neck. And that is your survival fight, flight part of your brain. I have a client who went through pretty significant childhood trauma of physical abuse and mental torture, I would say. And she continues to have flashbacks to this day. Unfortunately, I think she has the most stubborn PTSD I've ever seen. We've tried many things, and it hasn't moved very much. And so there are times when she'll be just kind of sitting in her house, and she'll end up in the bathroom on the floor crying. And she says, what happened? She had another flashback to an incident, and it's pretty common. The thing that she goes back to is a very severe traumatic incident for her. I don't want to speak specifically, sure. But so she kind of comes out of it, and she says, what the heck happened? Oh my God, I was there again. I was 8 years old again. And it feels exactly the same as it did when she was 8, and here she is in her 50s.
Wow. Yeah.
This is pure dissociation. And I want people to know that this is real. Nobody's making this up. It is debilitating. It's scary. Most of the time, it's very treatable. This is somebody who's kind of an anomaly for me in working with someone who has this persistence over time, but it's real. And what we used to call multiple personality disorder, DID, is real. People dismiss it. We can talk about that in a minute. So my client has PTSD. She has all those criteria. So she has those dissociative episodes where she thinks she's somewhere else. She loses time, which is another part of dissociation. So what happened to the last half an hour? What happened to the last 2 hours? I have no idea where I was. Another common thing. And this is all from trauma, which again is overwhelming to the nervous system and gets processed and gets held and stored in this limbic system part of our brain and can kind of break through to our regular functioning and really mess us up.
Just to
and this relates to IFS.
Yeah, I was going to say just to put categorize where we are. Is this one of the firefighters? This is dissociative protectors. Is that where we're sort of circling around?
We're talking about dissociative protectors, okay. Yes. And so for your audience, what I want to say is that so right now for IFS, as we said, we all have those parts. And IFS says that we have parts called exiles. We'll talk about the self in a minute, but exiles that are all the memories, all the pain, and some parts can carry the shame, and some parts carry fear, and some parts carry shame and fear, and some parts carry guilt. I mean, it really depends upon the individual's system, internal system. That's why he calls it internal family, because you have an internal family there. So your internal system and what your internal system needed to do in order to survive and cope with those experiences of overwhelm. And so the exiles, so let's say for this particular client, an exile is her 8-year-old who experienced specific traumatic events, and her system organized for her to protect her from ever feeling those feelings again because they were so painful. So she had parts, we call them protectors, and protectors, there are 2 types of protectors or 3 types of protectors. One is a manager, one is a firefighter, right? The managers are the ones that keep us busy, like you wrote down in this note. They keep us busy. They keep us doing things. Right. So she was a fantastic worker. I mean, fantastic worker. And fantastic at doing things around the house and was always busy doing things and was very good at it and very accomplished in what she was doing. She also was very much a caretaker of others and was what felt responsible for others, so was doing for them and functioning at a very high level in that way. Firefighters, they're the parts of us that come when the feelings get too hot. They come in to cool them down. So classic firefighting, people who cut, people who burn themselves, so self-harm types of behaviors. this needs to just, this needs to calm down. Or it could be actually the opposite. I'm feeling so numb, I have to feel something. Okay? And so they'll cut and they'll feel something. Addiction, classic firefighter. Douse it with alcohol. Douse it with drugs. So if you can think that way, that the feelings are too painful, these exiles are starting to break through, and the protectors are going, we're never going to feel that way again. We're not going to deal with that again. So their job is to make sure that you never feel that pain, shame, humiliation, guilt, lonely, whatever it is, again.